Good morning. I'd like to call the Advisory Board of Athletic Trainers meeting into session here this morning, and thank you all for being here. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving and an opportunity to spend some time with family and friends, but we have some business of the day to take care of, so we'll start this with a board member roll call. So we'll start with Brittany.
Here.
Dr. David Smith.
Here.
Daryl Gaines is absent. Mr. Fitch.
Here.
And myself, David Ware, is presiding officer, present. So we have 4 members here, 1 absent. So we do have a quorum, so I'll certify that the quorum is met and present, and we're able to conduct official business this morning. You were sent, board members, you were sent a copy of our summary of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on, let's see, what was that? January 14th, 2019. It's been a while since we've been together. So do I have a motion to accept those as written?
So moved.
Mr. Fitch has made a motion to accept those. Do I have a second?
Second.
Brittany seconds that motion. Any discussion before we take a vote? None heard. All in favor of accepting the minutes as written and presented to you, indicate that by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like? Okay. Board, the motion is moved, accepted, and passed. I would like to adjust our agenda just slightly before we move into public comment. We have some very special guests that we would like to honor this morning, and this has become an opportunity to recognize individuals for various achievements, and we have a couple of different types of things this morning to recognize. First of all, I want to recognize a family of a gentleman that are with us this morning, and that's the family of Mr. Paul Zeke. To give you a little bit of background, Mr. Zeke passed away this past year, and well, just a little of my notes here. Apologize for that. But anyway, Mr. Zeke was born November 17th, 1939, and passed away June the 11th of this year. Mr. Zeke was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and grew up in El Paso. He attended Texas Western College, which is now known as UTEP. For those of us a little bit older in the room, Mr. Zeke had the opportunity to work while he was at UTEP for Mr. O.A. Bum Phillips. So some of us older people understand who that gentleman is in the state of Texas, certainly, and in many cases nationally. Mr. Zeke developed a really good relationship with his head coach, and ultimately Coach Phillips took him to Fort Natchez Groves High School when he went there to coach, and so that relationship started early. Mr. Zeke eventually became the athletic trainer at Brazosport High School in Freeport, where he served for 6 years. Mr. Zeke went on in 1971 and joined the Lamar University staff as an athletic trainer, where he spent from that point in time to 1992 as a distinguished athletic trainer here in the state of Texas and certainly in the collegiate setting. He oversaw the education of dozens of student athletic trainers during that period. Also was an instructor in the Department of Health and Kinesiology Department. He ultimately retired as a senior associate athletic director, where his chief responsibility of being a compliance officer for the NCAA and the Southland Conference. His career spread over 50 years, and he even after he retired, he continued to and moved to Bernie. He continued to help with some of the UTSA events and some of the high school events there in the San Antonio area. We in the athletic training world and the regulation world, we sometimes get to be known as a number. I know my number is AT1144, but Mr. Zeke had the privilege of being known as number 100. His was the first license ever presented. Back when the licensure law was done, there were a few distinguished gentlemen at that point in time that were grandfathered in and presented a license as they were part of the organizing faction that organized the licensure law and got it off the ground. So today we want to honor Mr. Zeke and his family for being number 100, the first athletic trainer ever licensed in the state of Texas. And recognize them, present back to the family his original license that he was given, also a certificate of his accomplishment and what he has meant and what his life and legacy has meant to the field of athletic training in the state of Texas and the licensure of the athletic trainer in the state of Texas. So, Mr. Francis, any comments or anything you want to meet me at the?
Absolutely, I'd love to. What a privilege. Wow. The first. The first. So was he at home like taping your ankles every now and practicing or anything like that?
I had that privilege.
You had that privilege.
No, we were at the school with them. He wasn't at home taping ankles. We were at school with them. But I played at Lamar University. So
Okay.
I was an athlete there, so I had that privilege.
We're so honored.
I saw him more when I moved out.
Did you really?
Yeah, when she did that.
Ice baths and all those good things.
Yep.
So as the executive director of this agency, this is one of the things I enjoy the most, being able to show respect and honor to those that have led the way. And this particular field of athletic training, you see my little limp and everything. I've had broken ankle, broken thigh, collarbone, split clavicle and all those good things. I would never give up my sporting life. And the athletic trainers, I owe so much to them. Coach Henry was the worst athletic trainer in the world that I have. His diagnosis for every injury, cracked skull, take an ice bath. Broken thigh, get in an ice tub. You'll be fine, Francis. Just shake it off. But I remember how much we relied on them to keep us fine-tuned, to keep us healthy, to teach us things that are going to carry with us for the rest of our life. I can only imagine how many athletes that Zeke, because I'm sure that's all they referred to him as, that Zeke took care of. Mr. Zeke, oh my gosh, I got scared. Okay, I thought he was coming over my shoulder here. It's like, and Mr. Zeke took care of. I mean, Mr. Zeke touching those athletes and inspiring them and encouraging them. I had a friend in a high school compadre that went to Lamar University, Bum Phillips. I mean, that I can only imagine the dialogues back and forth and the conversations and the knowledge and the wisdom that was shared. We thank y'all so much for taking the time to come here. I'd like to read this to you if I could. I'm going to get these old man glasses off my head. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulations Certificate of Recognition and grateful appreciation to Mr. Paul T. Zeke for becoming a pioneer as the first athletic trainer licensed in the state of Texas. TLR thanks you. For his unmatched skill in providing care for student athletes in Texas for over 50 years, TLR thanks you. For his dedication to athletic training and work as a role model, TLR thanks you. For his lifelong commitment to his family, friends, and athletic training industry, TLR thanks you. Awarded to wife Phyllis and daughters Karen and Leanne the 2nd day of December 2019. Signed David Weir, Brian Francis, and Chairman Rick Figueroa. Thank you so much. If we could take a picture, there we go. So you're a golfer? Outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to say a few words?
As she walks off. Well, we appreciate everything. Dad was very instrumental. Leanne, I think, would agree that the only vacations we had as kids were going to NATA or SWATA. So that would be how we grew up, living in Waco in the summertime for SWATA and then wherever NATA happened to be. There were a few trips we would have liked to have gone to, but didn't, such as Hawaii when basketball went there. But we grew up in the training room. Leanne was an athlete. I was a wannabe and ended up deciding that training wasn't for me, and I went into physical therapy and have spent over 30 years in physical therapy. So it's just been an honor growing up watching Dad. We both have the values. We've grown to love the trainers that were under Dad. We have one of them with us today. They learned a lot. We know from many schools that they prepared specially when the Cardinals were coming to join them and Mr. Zeke was going to be there. And they had a countdown to when Mr. Zeke was going to be there and he was going to be looking at their facilities as well, whether it was for a sporting event or when he was being a regulator through different organizations. So we're very proud to be his daughters and very proud to be here today. And thank you for this great honor towards him.
Thank you so much.
In this past year, there was an alumni event, and we in college athletics understand that we depend a lot on our alumni, and we try to keep touch with our previous athletes and to keep them connected back into the institution. And at TCU, they do the same things, and this year had an annual alumni basketball game, kind of a pickup basketball game for previous or former basketball players. And but this one would not be different. On August 25th, there was a former TCU basketball player that collapsed and literally died on the TCU basketball court at Schomer Arena. And at that point in time, fortunately, there were a couple athletic trainers that were courtside, one of them being here today, Mr. Chris Hall, and also Mr. Matt Merrill, who's not in attendance with us today, but they were there. And so both of them responded. Our jobs never stop. We're first responders and athletic trainers that continue on day in and day out, whether they're a current athlete or a former athlete. So, but fortunately, Mr. Hall and Mr. Merrill responded to the scene, and Mr. Merrill, I think, acquired or went and retrieved the AED and assisted Mr. Hall in getting the AED attached and CPR being started. And fortunately, that gentleman survived, and he was brought back to life by the equipment and the quick reactions of a couple athletic trainers there at TCU. So Mr. Hall is with us today. We would like to recognize him. And Mr. Francis, would you join me in that presentation of that? And then also Mr. Hall is going to take back the certificate for Mr. Merrill. Hopefully Mr. Merrill might be watching us out on the World Wide Web and watching this being live streamed. But if he is, Matt, thank you for your service to our profession, and we appreciate all that you've done for us.
So I was reading the article from Nancy Woods, who we're also going to honor today. And one of the things that she said that was so striking is that you train, you learn, and you prepare, but you actually hope that you never have to use that skill to save someone's life. Amen. That you don't want that moment to happen. And to have one of your former athletes fall in front of you, it's got to be shocking. But, man, Pate's here today because of the actions that you guys took. That's a beautiful thing. And I know that in this season of Thanksgiving, I can just imagine how his family was sitting around the table. This year, each of my family members said what we were thankful for. And I imagine that every last one of his said they're thankful for you. They're thankful for what you did, that you saved his life. That's an honor. And that's something that I think athletic trainers have that gift and that ability to do. It's an honored profession. It's something that's amazing. And I just hope that this little token of our appreciation we'll share with you and that you'll hold it high. So if I can read this again, old man glasses on top of the head. Athletic trainers, can y'all heal bad vision? Is that something? You can try?
Give us a roll of tape. See what we can do.
So we call this the Courage Under Pressure Award, presented in recognition to Christopher Hall, for your calm, quick thinking actions that saved the life of Texas Christian University alumnus Johnny Pate during the TCU alumni basketball game on August 25th, 2018. In Fort Worth, Texas. You're a gold standard for your profession and acted as an outstanding example for all Texas athletic trainers. Given on the second day of December in the year 2019, signed by Brian Francis, Mr. David Weir, presiding officer. We have one for you. And I think you said you're going to take yours to Matt as well. Outstanding. It's so beautiful. If we can get a picture, can we get on this side?
Sure.
Prove Matt that I was here. Thank you very much. I appreciate the recognition, really. As you mentioned, we train for a lot of different things, and we hope that the bad things never occur. People ask Matt and I, what was racing through our heads, and both of us said the same thing at the same time, which was kind of eerie, is that we just had to take care of the kid. We didn't think about it. We just reacted, and we just did our jobs, which is what we do. And this body certainly helps us to be able to regulate us, to make sure that we do the right things to protect those that are physically active here in the state of Texas. I'm fortunate enough that my career at TCU spanned 30 years. I've got a lot of kids that I still hear from. I retired 4 years ago from them. Now I work for Texas Health in Fort Worth. The people that we've met and the places that we've gone to and the educational programs that we've done year in and year out all make a huge difference. And the programs that we have in the state of Texas will rival anyone in the country as far as I'm concerned. There's no question. They do a tremendous job, not only at the collegiate level, but certainly what the state association, what we're doing at the high schools, which is far and above what the rest of the country is doing, because they haven't quite figured it out yet. So it was wonderful to hear the words from Mr. Zeke, a great man. I spent many time on the phone talking with him. I also am currently serving as the national director for the NATA representing District 6. And he and I had a lot of discussions about procedure and the future and what's happened. And it was always wonderful to hear his words, and he would tell you exactly what he thought, which was great, because sometimes you just need to be heard. You need to hear those words. But that's what makes up our profession so wonderful, was the people and what we have behind it. So again, thank you all very much for your jobs that you're doing within the licensing. It's top notch. So, but thank you for the recognition. Unfortunately, I've got to head back to Fort Worth. I've got a 1 o'clock meeting in corporate, so so I'm going to get on 35 and hope that the speed traps aren't out there. So, anyways, but happy holidays to everybody. Thank you very much.
Also this morning, we would like to recognize Marshall ISD athletic trainer, Ancy Woods. She is unable to be with us this morning, but this past fall, a junior high school athlete went down and occurred on October the 29th of 2019. And fortunately, due to her quick actions of also securing an AED and starting CPR, she was also able to save that young man's life as well. So we will get her certificate mailed to her. She was just unable to attend this morning. So we want to go ahead and recognize, and hopefully maybe Ancy is out there watching us as well. And if you are, Ancy, thank you for your service to our profession and the accomplishments that you've done and the heroic efforts that you've done in saving this young man's life.
Ancy, on behalf of the state of Texas, the Department of Licensing and Regulation, we want to thank you for receiving the Courage Under Pressure Award. It's presented to Ancy Woods for your calm and courageous actions that saved the life of an 8th grade student athlete. Wow. During the Marshall Junior High School football game on October 29, 2019, you are the gold standard for your profession and acted as an outstanding example for all Texas athletic trainers. Given on the 2nd day of December in the year 2019, wow, I just got emotional. 8th grade, I can't even imagine. Signed by Brian E. Francis, Executive Director, and David Weir, Presiding Officer of the Advisory Board. What a beautiful blessing you are. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for being an example for all athletic trainers. We're going to take this picture with you, and we're just going to photobomb you in here. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
y'all for coming.
Okay, thank you very much for indulging in this opportunity to recognize these fine individuals for their and families for the accomplishments of their loved ones and certainly the accomplishments of these athletic trainers. So we'll move back in now and resume our meeting and move into our public comment in section D. I think a couple of those that were mentioned here. Joel was a part of the Zeke family, and Chris was a part of the recognition. So Mr. Spanky Stevens has signed in and would like to speak this morning in a public comment and updating the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And having served on this board for 22 years myself, I know the exact importance of it and what it means. And it's interesting that Paul and I used to have Paul Zeke and I used to have an ongoing chit chat about him being 100 and my license being 106. And so, what a great person. He was one of the founders that started in 1971 that got the approval for licensure in the state of Texas. And 48 years later, we've grown to where we are now, and there's changes that Director Francis and I have had a conversation a couple of years ago about, goals that he saw and we saw together the same light and stuff, and part of it is bringing the wording of our law up to date. And in doing that what we formed a task force that was first set up to do the law originally. And then after another conversation, Director Francis and his staff and I had that the education component needed to be brought up to date as well. With the changes that are coming in 2022 with the BOC and stuff with master's only certification and stuff. So the biggest change that as far as the law is concerned, the proposed change that we're going to put is that the practice of athletic training and redefine it. And the big thing is how we administer, how we work under a physician, as though we work under it now. For the past 3 years, it's been very important to us to spread the word how important letter of delegated authority from the physician that you have in your training room setting, no matter where you work at, whether you work in a hospital or clinical setting or with the military, no matter where you are working as a licensed athletic trainer in the state of Texas, that you need to have that in there. So we changed the wording, and you're going to have, this is a last minute addition, me being here and stuff, was to bring you up to date to which we've already met with TDLR back in August, and we've made progression since then and stuff. And so right now I can read you and you're going to have a copy of this sent to you within the next day or two. It's the practice of athletic training means a form of health care includes the treatment of an individual for risk and management, prevention of injury, illness, or both, the evaluation and access of injury and or illness, or both, the emergency care and therapeutic intervention for an injury or illness, or both, and the recondition of injury or illness, or both. The athletic trainer practices under the direction of, in collaboration with, and or under the delegated authority of a physician licensed by the Texas Medical Board. And this is clear and precise in wording that needed to be changed. And when we set this committee up, we, 2 years ago, to do this, because we didn't want to rush into anything for this past legislative session, and the uncertainty of what was going on within the legislation itself. We felt like it was real important that we get both feet on the ground, have a direct plan of how we're going to do this, and we have met with Representative Price from Amarillo, who was our lead sponsor on our concussion bill in 2011, and he really wanted to be part of this, and so we're going to meet with him next month and go over it and what we're going to do and stuff, and have a plan for the session of 2021. And the other changes that we're looking at is to remove some ways instead. We're rewriting the component of the apprenticeship and what they must maintain and stuff, and then we'll get into how we're going to do this. And because one of the things that was brought to us was the concern of first-time test takers, especially those that are coming from apprenticeship programs and non-curriculum programs within the state of Texas. And so we took part of that task force that we put together and formed an educational oversight education committee, which contains 9 members, and we're using the chair of that committee is Billy Laxton, who's a former chairman of our board. He's presently at Sul Ross University, which is going to become the model program for this. And we're going to rewrite this in the law. It says have completed or is 30 hours of completing a bachelor's degree and or post-bachelor degree, which includes a minimum of 24 hours of combined academic credit, specific coursework related to athletic training, practice, and 1,800 hours of apprenticeship program in athletic training, clinical practice completed in at least 3 years, which 200 hours of those can be outside. The big part of this was that under our law, as it stands today, that all we look at is the number of hours. And we knew we needed to change that. And we needed to be more specific in doing that. And so in doing this, we set up the oversight committee, which Billy, like I said, Billy Laxton is the chair of it, but also that in doing this, that we included 4 present members of directors of curriculum programs in the state of Texas as they stand right now that are not going to the master's program in 2022. And so we felt like that was really important that we have these people on the committee. We also have a Division III licensed athletic trainer, an outreach athletic trainer, and then a junior college athletic trainer. All these people are licensed in the state of Texas, part of this. So we have a wide gamut of things that we want to do. And Mr. Chairman, if I go too far, let me know. Okay. And so what we did is that we developed our own curriculum. It's not a mandated curriculum. It is one that we're going to provide to the colleges and universities that are not going to the master's type program. And the important factor in this is the 3 years of doing the apprenticeship or internship, whatever you want to call it, and the 24 hours of education. It is not necessary for the institution and stuff to set up a degree program unless they want to do it themselves. That is strictly up to that institution. But yet they have to have design courses covering all 6 of the domains that are necessary that are covered presently in our state test, with knowledge and skills and assessments in doing that. And so we as a board with the TSATA, we decided that I felt like it was real important that this was going to, all we wanted to do was cover our expenses of providing this information for it. To be able to cover the meetings, the travel, the meals of the 9 members of this board wherever they meet and stuff twice a year and go. Our state is divided up into 9 regions as it is now. We have 9 members on our present board. Each individual on that board will have a certain region of the state to look after in those institutions within that process. So we then started developing in the curriculum. And the curriculum is based on the 6 domains. And that each part of doing this, giving them information of how we're going to do, how it should be done and stuff. And so I felt like it was just like real important, like in our sports medicine curriculum that we give the athletic trainers in the school districts. We give them the notebook, everything they need to present and do to teach the sports medicine 1, 2, and 3 are in this book, along with lesson plans. That all they have to do is take this information and present it however they want to the student. Well, this is what we're going to do with this program. We're taking the information, provide it for them, give it to them, and that they become what we call a TSATA approved institution, sports medicine, athletic training, whatever they want, whatever they would. They just have to designate an individual that we coordinate with. Now, how do they track these people? How do they keep up with it? Well, there is a system. They came to us in Las Vegas at our national meeting this summer in June. They came to me and 5 of the members of this committee, and we met with, it's called A-Track. And A-Track is tracks, not only has all the information that we want to put on there, so we put all of our curriculum information on this A-Track, but also you're able, the athletic trainer or the coordinator is able to sign off that David or Brittany or whatever the kid's, his or her name is, can see that they've covered that information. And that A-Track information helps the student. Now the student can have all that information themselves. For $80, they can have the domains and what's in there. The actual information and stuff is given to the coordinator, the person that presents the information to it, and keeps track of what each individual, each student has covered and hasn't covered and what needs to be covered. So all this is done for them. Presently under a program that's presently put up by the Katie or BOC is the cost of that program is $3,200 a year. Our program is that we're going to provide all the information and everything for them for $300. The A-Track is $350, and that's yearly. And we will update it, keep it up from our oversight committee. Will, just like we do in the sports medicine program, we update current information and place it into the, so that everybody that signs on has all that information for them. And it's real important that as we look at the 3 years of internship, now it is the question that has come to me in that what about those people that get into a master's program that don't have the 3 years of apprenticeship in a school and as an undergraduate, and only take 2 years of this and get their master's degree and then qualify to be licensed if they pass the certification test. We felt like that the 3 years of internship within the training room setting is the foundation of what our profession is about. So in conversations with different people across the state and stuff, we just felt like that was real important. So we were looking at ways how to do this, and then through conversations nationally and stuff with other people and stuff, it seems like there are many members of the VOC that are certified and stuff that are in this feel the same way we do, that the 3 years is real important. So we're going to back off and see what they do until 2022. And because if they feel like it's a third year, whether that third year would, for them, would be like an internship or a residency or whatever at whatever institution, and then they have that third year, and then they could qualify to take the national exam. Then we're playing on a level playing field with everybody, because most are going to come from a 3-2 program, but yet there are going to be individuals that can become certified under the way it sits today, according to the BOC, is that they could become certified after 2 years with only 2 years of working in the training room environment.
Okay.
So we're looking at that, and I think that's one of the things that we're just going to keep a close eye on. With our rules and laws and stuff, there's going to be some big changes. You know, the rewording of that and stuff is something that we're going to work with the legal department of TDLR, get their advice, do things, what we're looking at and stuff. Instead of saying human anatomy, it might say, you know, domain 1.
Right. Okay.
And go over all that. And so it's just that this is really the first time, other than ours, that once we get this all done, that we try to put it in our rules and laws first, and then in 2021 do the whole 9 yards with the legislature and stuff. And we have a strong backing of people that feel like that we're doing what, there will be some resistance. There's always some resistance to everything we do. And, you know, I think it's just real important that I don't know what the other 49 states are going to do, because we're the only one that has our own state law. We are the only state that uses apprenticeships, that qualify, that do the qualify in this curriculum and stuff, that will be able to take the state test and stuff. We already have one college and university just on one presentation that we made out to the 56 schools, that we invited them to a webinar that we had just to basically talk about this. We have one college and university that signed up, wants to be part of it.
Okay.
And there's probably 20 others right now that are very interested and we're going to do a eye-to-eye on January the 12th at Eastview High School in Georgetown with the other group that want to come and see. And we'll have it shown. We'll have the curriculum done hopefully by the middle of this month. We have the law changes and stuff in step, and meet with Representative Price and Hal Talton, his chief of staff, next month. And we're just we had to get all of our ducks in a row, because it's just that these people, that what we experienced today with the honoring of Paul and Matt and Chris. I remember when Chris and Matt were students, you know, and so to keep that, you know, to keep this where we set an example, that the state of Texas raises the bar in athletic training, which we've always done. It wasn't until we passed the concussion law that it decided that the NATA decided it was important that we get a national law. Well, they can't get it done, but, but that's okay. But 14 other states have our law some version of our law that we got passed on concussions in 2011.
Right.
And
Okay, well, we're going, if you can wrap pretty.
Okay, so-
I'll give you
so why
the
don't-
30-second warning.
Okay, so where I'm coming from, the problem that the other states, that's their problem. We're trying to keep the cattle within the pen and stuff like that till we get them all branded and stuff, and then put them out to pasture. That's all we're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your addressing the board this morning. And
My pleasure.
we have another agenda item that we may need to have you speak out on in a little bit later. But
Okay.
I want to get into, but thank you this morning for coming and presenting to us.
You bet.
Let me move into item F, staff reports. So licensing division, Leonard, if you could give us an update.
Good morning, advisory board members. My name is Leonard Rivas. I'm with the licensing division. In your meeting material, you have the licensing statistics for FY 2018 and then FY 2019. And then you have the what we've issued so far for September of FY 2020. The current population at the end of September was 3,967, and we issued one temporary license. Do y'all have any questions about the licensing report?
Fellow board, any questions?
The renewal process, have y'all had any issues with any of the people trying to renew? Have they been calling or anything like that to y'all? It seemed like there was some people who reached out to some of the board members that were having difficulty, and then some of them could submit it right, So I don't know if it's the seasoned athletic trainer who doesn't know how to use a computer or what, but did y'all see any issues?
To
on
my
the renewal?
knowledge, we didn't see any issues in the licensing division. Dawn may be able to answer that question if they received calls regarding that in customer service.
Yeah.
But in licensing, we didn't see any issues.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. To the right of me is Regina Horton, and Regina Horton is one of two team leads on the medical and health professions team. She transitioned to TDLR when the program's transferred from DSHS to TDLR. She started in the customer service division. She was there for about a year, and then she joined the licensing division about 6 months ago, and then we hired her as a team lead for the medical and health professions. So I just wanted to bring Regina up here and introduce her in case one day you see her up here and say, "Where's Leonard?"
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's Regina.
Well, thank you. Welcome. Welcome to working with us.
Do you have any other questions?
I don't think so. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Customer service?
Good morning, advisory board members. My name is Dawn Robinson. I'm one of the managers in the customer service division. In front of you, you have the customer service contacts for fiscal year 2019 and the current for fiscal year 2020. In September, our total contacts, emails, and phone calls were 366. And in October, our total contacts were 244. If you have any questions about the staff report, I'll be happy to assist.
Can you kind of break down kind of what their questions were off the top of your head?
The most common question were license status.
Okay.
And for the previous questions you had for Leonard, we had several athletic trainers call in about the renewal online, but most of those were resetting a password for the system, incidents like that.
Let me ask you a question. In customer service, if you all get a question that's kind of outside the norm, do you have a working process to get to the health professions area so that we can get those questions handled and answered? Because I'm hearing a little bit from license holders that sometimes return phone calls and getting questions answered and that sort of thing. And so you guys have a process for working those calls?
Yes, we do. We actually have a customer service workflow So if a call comes in and it's, let's say it's for licensing or it's for our regulatory programs, we do have a flow to where we send that over, ask the questions and send it on over to the team, and the team will call them back. So yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. Any questions, fellow board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're in the enforcement division.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Robert Reyes, a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. Since we last met in January of 2019, we've added an attorney to the staff. Her name is Amanda Barrera. She's been working our inspections cases in all of the programs that have inspections, such as barbering, cosmetology, electricians, so on and so forth. We do have 2 more openings that are posted, so we will be adding and filling in those spots on that inspection team. Since we last met, we've had 2 cases that I'd like to highlight for you. First was a case against Randall Lusby. An agreed order was issued on March 25th, 2019. On that day, an agreed order was entered assessing a $750 administrative penalty for 2 violations. Mr. Lusby was found to be performing activities of an athletic trainer without holding a license. As well, he was found to be holding himself out as an athletic trainer without holding a license to do so. Both are Class D violations according to the enforcement plan, and Mr. Lusby remitted payment in full for the penalties assessed on March 12, 2019. Second case to be highlighted for the board is the case against Clayton Prosser. On September 17, 2019, an agreed order was entered against Mr. Prosser, assessing a $375 administrative penalty for engaging in sexually exploitive behavior with a person receiving services from him. This is a Class D violation according to the Department's enforcement plan, and Mr. Prosser remitted payment for the penalty in full on August 19, 2019. You may be thinking sexually exploitive behavior and what that means. In this case, it was texting. There was no physical contact. So that was one of the facts that went into the case and how it was processed. Since there is an agreement took place, a reduced amount was the penalty. That's why we have that $375. Class D penalty is usually $500 and/or revocation. With the senior prosecutor, Ms. Cox, who prosecuted the case, took all that into under advisement and came out with that agreed order. As far as the statistics for the cases that the Enforcement Division has handled, this set of numbers is for the fiscal year 2019. We had 20 cases opened in the program, resolved 22 cases, so that might have been holdovers from the previous fiscal year that were opened then they were closed the following fiscal year in 2019. 1 final order and $750 in the amounts of penalties assessed and collected.
And can you define final order? What
Final,
does that mean?
yes, ma'am. Final order is, this case, an agreed order. There were no default orders. So that is something that the respondent licensee or the respondent non-licensee, in whichever case, has agreed with the determination and agreed with the facts as stated and alleged in the notice of alleged violation, and has come to an agreement with the department to take care of the violation. Yes, ma'am.
Board Member Webb, this is Brian Francis. So you have 3 final orders that can exist. One can be an order that goes all the way through the hearing process and our commission signs off on that. One can be an agreed order, which I sign off on, or a default order if they chose not to do anything. This industry, as you can tell from the statistics, there's a whole lot of compliance. Most of these things are going to be resolved, insufficient evidence, no finding, and they're closed with a warning sometimes, but a final order is when it rises up to that magnitude if we've got to do something based on that penalty matrix, and you just don't see a lot of action in your industry.
Yeah, When you ask for questions, I have questions about that process.
Sure thing, sure thing. For the fiscal year 2018, we had 17 cases opened during that fiscal year. 17 cases were resolved. There were no final orders, and that would include the default orders, such as Mr. Francis just stated, for 0 penalties assessed and 0 penalties collected. At this time, I'm open to any questions anybody may have.
So, just walk us through the process of somebody files a complaint.
Sure.
And then just walk us through that process, because I know that I've had some phone calls about that, and I
Sure.
don't know exactly what to say.
Either a complaint comes in, most likely, since this is going to be a consumer-driven situation, they're going to make a complaint either online, or they're going to send in a document to our intake division. Once that is reviewed, it's sent on to our investigation division, which then is assigned an investigator from the enforcement division. They call all the parties that are connected with the matter. The investigators then make a final report with their findings, what statements people have made, so on, and any physical evidence that they have may have obtained during the investigation. It's then sent on to the prosecution and the prosecution attorneys. We then read the investigation report, look at any physical evidence that may have been obtained during the investigation. We may also call back parties if we have additional questions, and then from there we're given the latitude through statute and through rule to determine which is the best route. As Mr. Francis said, we could close it out for insufficient evidence. Sometimes people withdraw their complaint, and they withdraw their complaint, it doesn't go forward. Sometimes we determine that a warning is necessary just for the facts that are involved. Sometimes if there is a clear violation and we need to make sure that we uphold the integrity of the license, we draft up a notice of alleged violation, which outlines the facts as we perceive them to be from the evidence that we have in the investigation that has been done. We we state the applicable law according to what has the transgression that we allege has been committed, and then we speak to the respondent, or if they don't want to speak to us, we go through our process. Once we've given them a formal notification by certified mail, return receipt requested, and regular mail, and they choose not to speak to us, we can move forward in a default manner. But we give the respondent every opportunity to speak to us, so that way we can get all sides of the story to make sure that everyone has a voice and everyone is heard. Well, we believe that we need full disclosure in things like this, and the best way to do that is to speak to the respondent as well as the complainant and any witnesses that may be identified through the course of the investigation by those parties speaking to our investigators or attorneys.
And so the final notification of y'all's conclusion, does it go to the plaintiff and the person that was accused?
It depends. If
Okay.
the complaint is made anonymously, which can happen online, then we don't have a complainant. They do not receive any sort of documentation of what has gone on. In some cases, a complainant who filed their complaint anonymously will call in. They'll identify themselves by name. They'll identify the respondent, and we have to tell them, until you attach your name to something, we're not allowed to acknowledge anything. So that occurs if they are willing to testify at a hearing, and they're an active participant in our investigation. Then yes, they do receive a letter with the final determination, whether it's a warning, a closing of a case for insufficient evidence, or if an NOAV has been filed, they can always seek an open records request and obtain documents that way.
It would certainly seem on this Prosser case at first blush that would make me a little nervous if I was just looking at it.
Sure. And that phrase right there, sir, Dr. Schmidt, is what is contained in the law and rule, in the rule, I believe. And so that is what has to be used. And that's why I felt that it was important to back that up immediately with the fact that it was a text and not an actual physical touching, because yes, that takes it to another stratosphere. I know that we're in agreement in that, sir.
Was his victim a minor?
I am not sure, but Ms. Cox is here, and she was actually the one who prosecuted the case. She can tell you in more detail.
Hi there, I'm Karen Cox, Senior Prosecutor, and this was my case. The target of the text was, in fact, a student at the time. I do want to emphasize a couple of things about these kind of cases. One, prosecutors do have the option of going outside the enforcement plan. In this case, I followed the enforcement plan recommended penalty, which is $500. We only go outside the enforcement plan in extraordinary circumstances, and we try to follow precedent in those cases. The basic fact of administrative law is something called that we aren't allowed to be what's called arbitrary and capricious, which is a polysyllabic legalese way of saying we have to treat the same violations in the same way, and we have to follow our own rules and precedent. So going outside of the enforcement plan requires getting permission from the Director of Enforcement to write a memo, send it to now Ron Foster. That's reviewed, signed, and it comes back. We don't do that very often, and in this particular instance, we followed the enforcement plan, which was adopted before the agency had a lot of experience handling athletic trainer cases, but also other cases that we didn't have a lot of background in personal services kind of programs. Fortunately for us, electricians and air conditioning contractors don't do this. So we didn't have a way of going back and figuring out how common this kind of violation would be and how the process would be followed. Also, the evidence in this case presented some challenges, one of which was, again, that it was a student and a minor that would have been the principal witness. Obtaining testimony in a public hearing from a minor is complicated. Sometimes and in this case is one of them, we take the case as we have it, follow the enforcement plan, and accept a settlement rather than trying to go to hearing and get what would be a bad precedent. There were factual challenges about the timing of the text and whether or not it was, as the rule requires, in the context of someone receiving athletic training services. But if you wish to reconsider this violation and your enforcement plan, you have an enforcement work group that is assigned this kind of task. Since this particular enforcement plan was adopted, the department has also adopted others in some more health-related programs and in our massage program where this kind of misconduct it's addressed more directly. So that we would have some precedent that we could refer to if you want to change this particular entry.
Certainly, I think in this day and time, sexting is not appropriate. And if we don't have rules in place that address it, then I think we should seriously consider it. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis speaking. When I look at just a quick skim of the enforcement plan, it's probably the first one we adopted when the program came over. And when I look at it, it's very, very weak. It's very weak. You could see that there was an effort to keep the penalties low for athletic trainers because they don't have a lot of violations. But when you look at this particular provision, it's $500 in the plan, and that's not enough. And there's a lot more granularity in the other programs. This one lumps sexually exploitive and sexual conduct in the same one, and it's $500 up to revocation. So I think it's worthwhile having that enforcement group get together and go back through it and have our enforcement division bring some of the experience from some of the other health programs we have that will put a little bit more teeth into this. And again, as I said before, Board Member Webb, your industry does a great job of regulating itself, but we also need to send a message, I think, in these areas as well. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to get this back.
We certainly will. We'll reactivate that.
Outstanding.
That group and have them revisit. And thank you for your knowledge and expertise and your willingness to bring us up to speed on that.
Absolutely. I think that the process about when a complaint is filed all the way up to when y'all get to look at it was important for our membership to hear, because there are a few out there that do have questions, so thank you very much.
Sure thing.
I think another thing that I would like to, I don't know procedurally, so I'll give you guys the challenge and then let you kind of come back with a working situation. I would like to try to look at improving communication, that when a board member brings you a case, that you do follow up with those board members. I just think I know myself, I take ownership, and, because I've had licensees contact me and said, would you send this forward, and would you get this turned in? And then and I know you guys are following up on it, but we just kind of drop out of the process. And I would like to be, if I bring it to you, I'd like to be in the process of knowing where we stand on a case, because I take that really personally and take ownership of it, because I was the one that sent it forward. And I think I speak on behalf of the fellow other board members. You can bring the reports to us here, that's appropriate. So I know from a quorum, we can, but back to that individual board member.
Sure.
So however that process, I'll let you guys kind of rally back and discuss that in your next meeting. How can that communication be done and handled? Okay,
We'll get it done.
thank you. Thank you for your report.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, education, examination.
Good job, Karen.
Good morning, Chair, Advisory Board members.
Good morning.
My name is Rebecca Armas, Education and Examination. I just have a few things for you this morning. One thing is this Saturday is the administration of the practical examination. I don't say this enough, and so I'm going to take this time to thank every single individual that helps make these administrations a success. I know they take time out of their Sundays in order to assist with the administrations of the exam, so I'd like to just publicly state thank you to everyone that has a hand in that. We couldn't do it without y'all, so thank you so much. And as you see in your statistics here, these are as of September 30th, so they're a little skewed, but if you compare fiscal year 19 to what we start at with 20, you'll see that first quarter we're going to have the majority of our examinees, and then at our next meeting you'll kind of see how it goes up a little with the attempts for written and practical. And we also wanted to share that the next 3 administrations of the practical examination have been published in the CIB, so that everyone can plan accordingly for the next few administrations in preparation for licensure. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Your area also looks at continuing ed courses.
Yes, sir.
What is the process for individuals that are applying to get continuing education granted based on coursework that they may be taking? They may be trying to delve out into a different medical career, nurse practitioner, whatever, nurse. What is that process as far as evaluating the coursework as to what we are going to accept?
It's compared to what is in your rules. What we have is if they've taken it through an association, we know that they're not, they don't have to be an approved provider through us. It's kind of the blanket approval. Unless it is someone seeking to be an approved provider with us, then they would submit the documentation and the applications and to be an approved provider. The comparison, so we had one, for example, I believe it was massage, and I believe I reached out to a member, we reached out to one of our subject matter experts as far as how that pertains to your industry. And, those are things that we will do. We will reach out to subject matter experts and let us know if it's within the scope and it's within your rule. Then if they're going to try to apply that, well, then we look at, okay, who did they take it through? And does it fall under the blanket approval, or do we tell them, we can't accept it because they are not an approved provider and they don't fall under the rule? But in any other case, that's the process. That's what we would do, is we'd handle them on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and so you go ahead and reach out to those subject matter experts when those come in?
Yes, sir.
In a time-appropriate manner?
Yes, sir.
You don't wait for another meeting or
Oh,
something
no.
to bring these together?
No,
At one time?
No,
Okay,
no.
okay.
We don't want anybody to sit and wait. We want to make sure we get everybody the answers they need at an appropriate time.
Because I know no athletic trainers ever wait to the last minute to turn
Oh,
in their
no, heavens,
continuing
no.
education. And then when something's not
11:59.
granted, is that they want to know why there's not something that was done, but they waited to the last minute to
Submit their
bring something
certificates.
in that was out of the ordinary.
Sure, sure.
So, anyway, okay, I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted to make sure I was clear on that process, and it's not going back to a committee, it's going to a subject matter. And it's typically are the same subject matter experts used, so that there's some type of continuity
Yes,
given
yes.
and applied to that?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
very good.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, regulatory?
David, I've known you over a decade. You actually said that with a straight face. I was impressed. Stuart Myrick, Regulatory Program Management, good morning. Before I get to the report, just personal note, as I just said, I've been privileged and honored to be a part of athletic trainer licensing since 2007, and I was honored to know Paul Zeke when I would go to Southwest Athletic Trainer Association conferences. He was one of the very first ones that would come to me when everybody else avoided me because they thought I had a shredder ready to shred their license.
He was coming to make sure you still had his.
Well, that was the thing. That was the thing. So, but he would always show up, he'd come say hi, and he always had a good story, whether it was about Bum Phillips or his work at Lamar University. I've got a friend of mine, former Longhorn, that coached at Lamar, Ray Woodard, and his stories were legendary there. And so it was great to have Mr. Zeke recognized here, and we have kept a copy of that license, because when we go to these conferences, that invokes so many good stories and so many good memories. So between that and what I lovingly call the old man book, the ledger, the original licensure database, we get a lot of good history about athletic trainers. So it's a lot of fun. Speaking of which, you see my report there. I won't go into too many details. You see some of the conferences I've attended. That includes the board certification has a regulatory conference every 2 years. I was privileged to attend that in Omaha, Nebraska. Get to hear some of the trends that are going on nationally. Obviously, a lot of talk about the upcoming changes to board certification. They're certifying requirements, the accreditation of athletic trainer education programs. One additional note that's come up since this report was created, I will be at the Greater Houston Athletic Trainer Society student workshop on January 11th at Shadow Creek High School in Pearland. Go Sharks. Sure. They're doing well in the playoffs. So if anybody has a workshop or conference they want me to show up at, all they do, let me know when, where, and we'll make it happen. So any questions about the report?
Thank you, Stuart, for being an outreach from this agency and having a presence at these meetings. We certainly appreciate it.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
Any other staff are always welcome to tag along with him and be a part of that. So several of the members in here have done that before, and we certainly appreciate it. Okay, Executive Office, Mr. Francis?
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, Executive Director with TDLR. And I just want to echo what you said about Stuart. I think having him on board, the continuity and the consistency from Department of State Health Services was so invaluable. He really brings an energy and a focus to the athletic training program that I appreciate. He's allowed the other groups to benefit from his experience, the historical knowledge, the old man ledger. He's a living, breathing old man ledger, but he's Stuart's done a great job. No, sir. No, sir. I thank him every time I see him for Baker Mayfield. He's getting a little tired of it, but I still thank him every time I see him. Mr. Chairman, a lot of things have been going on, personnel matters. So update, first of all, Carla James, our Deputy Executive Director, she is somewhere on the beach now, just hanging out.
Good for her.
She retired at the end of November, and she's done a great job for us. But man, just like using the sports metaphors, we have an incredible bench strength here at TDLR. I'm extremely fortunate in the role that I have. And so in replacement of Carla, Deputy Executive Director Mike Ayers-Mendez will now be over the indirect administrative portions of it. So financial services, IT, those groups will fall under Mike's watch. Under the regulatory program management, enforcement, and field inspections will now be Christina Kaiser, who you knew formerly as the Director of Enforcement. She rose up those ranks. And then over the licensing, education examination, and customer service group will be David Gonzalez, who's back here, who was formerly over our RPM group. So we've got a lot of talent. David's first day technically on the job is today, so you need to be working back there. Get to work for us, right? So we're really excited about that. We've had Ron Foster rose up to become a Director of Enforcement, and then Charlotte Melder rose up to become the Director of RPM. So a lot of changes, but the folks are experienced and they're seasoned in their roles. So TLR is moving forward. The other thing I'd like to touch bases on a little bit is the 86th legislative session ended at the end of May, and as is our pattern and our norm, there was a few new responsibilities that TDLR received. One is the motorcycle safety program from the Department of Public Safety. We'll begin operating that program on September 1. It's going to mesh perfectly with our driver education safety program. So now we have the four-wheel vehicles and the two-wheel vehicles. Ray's team, and three-wheel vehicles, that's right, trikes. I just got reminded, three-wheel vehicles. Ray's team will take the primary reign over those activities. So really looking forward to that. The other program that was transferred to TDLR is the motor fuels program. So you know them as the gas dispensers at every gas station. That program, we had anticipated we'd take over on September 1, 2020. We actually took them over on September 1, 2019. So it's been very busy, quite busy here at the agency, but the team is up to it, and they're doing a great job for us. TDLR for the 87th legislative session is under sunset review, and so, Mr. Chairman, it's going to be a two-part. 87th legislative session sunset review will be what we call our legacy program, so it's air conditioning contracting, electricians, towing, VSF, and those programs. Their statute, their enabling statutes. But the agency as a whole, our operations are under sunset review, our commissions under sunset review, as well as our advisory boards. So you will have an opportunity to weigh in on how TDLR is doing, how things work. It will not go directly to your statute, but it's going to go to the relationship that we have. Prominently on our webpage, you'll see the link that says Sunset Commission. You can submit your comments all the way through the end of this month and all the way through next year to April. They'll be in through April of next year. TDLR started the Sunset Review in October. We promptly had 14 meetings with the Sunset staff in the month of October and continue to work with them very closely. As I've said before at the very beginning of the process, and we'll continue to say it all the way through, we're going to be a smarter, better agency at the end of it. We're going to grow and we're going to be better from the process. The 88th session, TDLR will go back underneath Sunset again, and that will be with the health programs. And so the statute for athletic trainers will be looked at, and orthotists and prosthetists and massage therapy and those groups. So basically the programs that came over from the Department of State Health Services, their statutes will be looked at in that second phase of Sunset. So we're going to have a wonderful 5 years of Sunset Review that the agency will be undertaking. We're excited about it. No, really, we are. We're very excited.
You said that with a straight face.
That's it. I tried. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have Mary Winston give you an overview on some of the outreach as it relates to our webpage and our Office of Strategic Communications. I also want to offer, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, we could accept an excused absence for Board Member Gaines, if that's appropriate.
Thank you, Executive Director Bryan. Our communication outreach statistics, we've talked about a lot of outreach. We have customer service, which the calls come in, the emails come in, and how we respond. We have RPM, Regulatory Program Management, that actually is outreach and physically goes out there and answers questions. Those are our experts. So to know how we really are doing things, we have checks, double checks, triple checks. Our outreach statistics are kind of our triple check. It is not a scientific formula, but it's how we keep track of how our licensee body, as well as the citizens of Texas, are reaching out to us. So it helps us understand how the information that we have flowing out is being received and what we may need new FAQs on, new information. What is the public asking? So we take these in 6-month increments. So from May 15th till November 15th, we had almost 35,000 views on the specific page for athletic trainers. It's about 188 per day. We also test, and this is just for our future edification, if we ever come out with an app, how are they reaching out to us? Is it desktop? Is it tablet? Is it mobile device? We track that. 61% so far from desktop, 37% from smartphone. Then what are the top reasons that they're visiting the sites? Number one, how to apply for a new athletic trainer license, examination requirements, administrative rules, renewal of that license, and CE requirements. So kind of all in the same vein. And this lets us kind of keep stock on what we're putting out as our information and what we may need to enhance. Now that's that report, but I also wanted to introduce one other person. I've introduced her to our presiding officer, but for the rest of the board, we've had a lot of transition. Known her since I got to TDLR. I always say she trained me in enforcement. We have Ms. Angelica Lopez, and she comes to us from our enforcement division, and she is now the program specialist in our executive office for advisory boards, and she will be your contact for the advisory board. So,
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Any other questions? And Rebecca, I think I failed to ask you this question, and so would you approach the mic? You're like, oh my goodness, what is he going to? I escaped the table and he's brought me
Drum
back.
roll.
Recanting a witness. Where do we stand? The other big issue for the year that I heard numerous phone calls on was the continuing ed auditing process. Can you update us? We had talked about procedurally changing that to where people that were selected for audit would not have their license be suspended or show suspended on website, basically allowing that opportunity for them to submit and turn in there and have that information evaluated prior to, suspending them or showing them as expired because they haven't checked all the boxes in their renewal. So where are we in that process? And if you're not the right person, and Ray is coming to your aid, by the way, so if you, but anyway, so if you could help me out, where are we in that?
yes.
Good morning, Chair, Weir, members, Ray Pizarro, Director for Education Examination Division. We are looking at the current law this is not only for this program, but for the other health programs, and we're trying to see the interpretation of that law and how it reads, because it says for renewal purposes, and we are currently doing you must show proof prior to renewal. We're trying to get there where we could make a change to say renew, and we will come on the tail end and audit you to see if you have completed the required courses. And I believe that's where you're getting at.
Exactly.
And we are currently and continually looking at that.
Okay.
It has been set aside for some time. We've had other things that rose to the top, as you heard our executive director mention all these little movements going on. It is still on our radar. We do want to make that change because we do want to actually hold some folks to the fire and make sure that we are doing the right thing.
Okay.
But we are
That
beginning.
is from a customer service.
Sure.
That is the biggest, I think, biggest item of when I get the angry phone call, and I had a bunch. Because some individuals, they were literally being suspended from work. And that's the last thing that we want to do, is take somebody's paycheck away from them without due cause and process. So I would just say from a board, I'm going to ask you to push it back to the front burner, that we really look at this, and if it's something that we can address in the rules portion, and I know we can't conflict the law, so if it's stated in the law, I know that's binding, but procedurally, we've got to figure out, or I ask you guys to try to figure out a workable solution to this, even before we can get the law changed.
Understood. One additional comment, just so that you know, procedurally, we're trying to improve on how we actually conduct those audits currently. In other words, we don't want to hit that button and say you're under audit and it's Christmas time, for example, because that kind of, is that where you're going? That kind of, it takes away time from that person. So we're being more cognizant about the auditing process and when we do it. We want to make sure that that person has ample time to submit the things that they need to submit to us.
Right, exactly, perfect. And I think, even if it's a fact that you're notifying them early, if you know that if, I'll use Brittany as an example, if Brittany's expiring October 31st, if she's able to, have her notified October 1st, hey, if you choose to renew, you need to have your documentation, you're going to be audited upon this renewal, and you need to have this done by October 31st. That way, if she waits till October 31st, to press the button to send her money, at least she has been notified that she needs to have these things in order. I think would be even a procedure to consider. So I throw that out there to what can be done that we can fix it.
Chairman, we're Rebecca Armas, Education Exam. We've gone to a 90-day notice.
Okay.
So the audit letters are now going out 90 days prior to expiration.
That's excellent.
Yes.
Thank you for
to alleviate some of the lag time of everything happening all around the holidays. So now we've pushed it out to 90 days.
I compliment you on that adjustment. That's great. Thank you.
And thank you also for kind of adjusting the letter to make it more clear, because that also helped our membership too in knowing what step-by-step athletic trainers need step-by-step. And so thank you for doing that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you coming back. Sorry. I have to bring
Mr.
you
Chairman,
back.
Brian France, we'll definitely move that to the top of making sure, because it's something that goes across the health programs. That's the first universe of population of programs that had the audit feature. Our other programs, the legacy programs, we had the continuing education provider. We knew who they got it from, and they were giving us that information as soon as they completed the course. So it's a different rhythm, but we'll definitely figure this one out, and we'll move it to the top.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think we're at item G. Ms. Fidel, is this your lucky time?
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Molly Fudel, Assistant General Counsel here at TDLR. So I'm going to be going through the proposed rules that we have for you today. Some of these rules are from a work group, which Chair Weir and Advisory Board Member Brittany Webb were on. That work group was designed to look at ways to improve the pass rate on the Texas written exam. And some of these changes were proposed by staff. So I'll identify each one as I go through them, and feel free to chime in at any point, ask me any questions that you might have. So the first changes that we have are in 110.21, license requirements. Under A1A, this is a required coursework under the apprenticeship route. We're adding in human physiology under human anatomy and human physiology. This came from the work group, and Chair Weir and Member Webb advised us that this is an essential knowledge area for all athletic trainers, and that it is already being taught at programs across the state. So it's essentially our rules catching up with the profession. The next change that we have is at the bottom of page 1, under subparagraph C. This is from staff, and this is a clarification. We're adding in a sentence saying that an affiliated setting may be any setting where athletic training takes place, and that's under the apprenticeship route. That's clarification. It does not change the meaning of the rules. It's just to make them easier to understand. All right, so moving on to page 2. Under paragraph E, it's about 3 paragraphs down. Here, this is from the work group. We're adding in some required topics under the apprenticeship. We are adding in administrative management and assessment of injuries. And again, Chair Weir and Advisory Board Member Webb advised us that this is, again, an essential knowledge area, and it's already being taught across the state. All right, the next changes are further down under C3. It's towards the bottom of the page. This is another clarification, and it's from staff. This is under the apprenticeship for physical therapy and corrective therapy. We're adding in the sentence for an affiliated setting, maybe any setting where athletic training takes place. Again, not a change in meaning. And we're also taking out some words talking about an affiliated setting being collegiate, secondary, or professional school, because that tended to describe everything. So we're just going to go ahead and remove those words. That's what's proposed. On the next page, this is 110.23, examination for licensure. Under 3A through E, we're proposing to add in the domains that are tested on the written exam. This was recommended by the work group, and essentially the idea is to provide some advance notice, aside from just the candidate information bulletin, of what is going to be tested. And this is a non-exclusive list, so, but these are topics that could be tested on the written exam. One of the key things is that this will also provide notice to the athletic trainer who runs the apprenticeship program and is in charge of educating the students. So the next change that's proposed is under M and N, and this was proposed by staff. So under this one, the proposal is to allow the department to accept BOC, Board of Certification exam results, from any time period, not just on or after January 1st, 2004. And so the reasoning behind this was that any concerns about the BOC prior to that date have been lessened by the fact that the applicant has been out practicing for at least 15 years at this point and presumably honed their skills to a point where they wouldn't have to retest. Now, Chair Weir kindly gave me some history on this date, and I understand that the reasoning why it is in there is because there were concerns about the BOC prior to January 1st, 2004, and essentially, at that time, the apprenticeship was only 2 years under BOC, where it was 3 years, and it's still 3 years under Texas. So I understand this may be something that y'all want to talk about, and whether that date is still necessary, or whether that extra year of apprenticeship has been made up by the years they've been out, the applicant has been out practicing. We can do that discussion right now, or we can wait until I'm done going through the rules.
I'd like to address this, speaking only as myself as one board member, and a board member that was at the DSHS program when it was being held there. This date is very, very important. Because of what you stated, is that prior to 2004, the BOC had 2 routes to certification. One was an apprenticeship, one was a curriculum route. Their apprenticeship rules only required 2 years, where we've held fast in the state of Texas that 3 years was the minimum. And so when we basically went through and allowed the exam waiver process to go through and to not require students that were coming in from out of state, we could not be assured that prior to 2004 that they had met the same requirements that we were requiring of the students in the state of Texas. The NATA does not look at whatsoever your work history of what you've done in the last 15 years or whatever. There is no reciprocation. You must meet the requirements of the NATA BOC at the time that you're applying. And so they do not recognize any of those types of things. So I, for one, can't say that I'm in favor of taking out that date. I think that date's very, very important, and that's why we as a DSHS board went back and utilized that date. This was a contentious item of when we passed this at that agency, and was very important. So I can in no way support this.
I agree with that. I think that it would be a little bit of a slap in the face of some of the more senior athletic trainers across the state to remove that date. So I agree with Chairman Weir.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move on. The next changes that are proposed are under 110.30, temporary license. Essentially, under subsection B, what we're proposing is to change the term of the temporary license. We inadvertently created a loophole in the last rule change when we required that an applicant pass the written exam before the practical. The way that this is worded, the existing rule says that the temporary license lasts until the results of the first practical examination, which the applicant is eligible to take, are released. Essentially now, the way that the exam is administered, somebody could take the written exam and not pass it for a long time, and under this rule, their temporary license would continue. That's not the intent of the temporary license or this rule, so this change would fix that.
Right.
And essentially what we're saying is the temporary license would allow somebody to practice until the results are released from the first practical examination that occurs 30 days after that license is issued. And that gives the applicant a reasonable minimum amount of time to be able to register for, pass the written, and then register for the practical.
Okay.
The changes to subsection C that are proposed are in the same vein. So this, as the rule exists now, it has some language about voiding a license. That language is really not necessary because the way that temporary licenses are issued, the license expires after that practical examination. So there's no need to void a license. So staff is proposing to take that language out.
Okay.
The final proposed change is under 110.70, standards of conduct. This is proposed by staff, and it's based on guidance from the Office of the Attorney General. So they have issued a few opinions on this. The rule, as it currently stands, prohibits all testimonials. According to the Attorney General, the law as it stands, First Amendment law, allows people to prohibit advertising that is false, misleading, or deceptive. But a rule like this that outright bans testimonials is broader than that. And it's essentially saying that all testimonials are false, misleading, and deceptive.
That's interesting.
And so staff is proposing that be taken out of the rules.
Okay. Any questions for Molly, fellow board? We covered the one that I had a big concern about, but was there any other language in here that you have concerns or questions about?
I have the same concerns with the M and D that y'all talked about, so I don't need to restate it.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, I don't have concerns either way, but I'm lost.
Okay.
What that language coming out, that bar of what are the real world implications? Do we still have folks that are applying in Texas that did the 2003 exam? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, and I was asking Stuart what the volume is.
Mr. Francis, I'm not saying that this is now applying, but we're only talking about 15 years. So, I mean, I give an example of maybe an athletic trainer, in the collegiate setting, it's becoming, more and more popular to bring your athletic trainer with coaches, as an example.
Okay.
Okay, so.
It could be happening very recently with a school here in Austin. They may be doing that. Maybe doing that soon.
We won't go there, but we'll go XYZ University has an athletic trainer that may be a 20-year veteran that went through a curriculum program outside of the state of Texas,
Okay.
and his coach is now moving to a university in the state of Texas to coach a sport, and he wants to bring this
That person.
longtime athletic trainer with him or her to be a part of his staff. And if we were to strike this, that athletic trainer that went through an internship program in 2000 now could come into the state of Texas and would be able to go through the exam waiver, and he would have possibly only have done 2 years of an apprenticeship internship program. Whereas the athletic trainer in the state of Texas in the year of 2000, if they were coming in under the internship route, had to have 3 years. And so, which is less of a requirement than the athletic trainer in the state of Texas.
Is there any scenario that you can see where, and I definitely get it, person starts out, comes in with just 2 years versus 3 years? When does their 12 or 15 years of experience overcome that 1 year that they missed?
I will say when the BOC recognizes 12 or 15 years of experience to allow you to be certified.
So it's their
in the
process
BOC.
really that we're talking about.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, I just think that it's a situation to where we as a board at DSHS felt very, very strongly about that date. That's when the BOC went through education reform.
Gotcha.
Their only route was a curriculum program. We felt like going backwards prior to that date, then we are opening up the gate to those athletic trainers coming in. And so we feel like that we owe it to the citizens of Texas and the license holders of Texas that were under those requirements. The same situation, an athletic trainer who's worked in the state of Texas for 25 years as an internship product, licensed athletic trainer, you'll sit there and say, wow, that's 20 years of wealth of knowledge. He has a degree in kinesiology, went through an internship program. If he or she were to apply to the BOC to get a certification, they're going to be told no. And they're going to say, what is my route? They're going to say, go to a master's program and get a master's degree in a curriculum program and then sit for our exam. That would be their route to certification for national certification. That is their only route. And that's what they're going to be told. They're going to say, well, what about, I've practiced for 20 years. And they'll say, well, that's very nice. Hopefully you're prepared to take our exam.
And I think the other point, Executive Director Francis, is that we're not preventing that athletic trainer that's coming with his coach from practicing in the state of Texas, but we're just asking him to prove that you're competent by taking our examination. And it's pretty simple.
So just, and we can go down this path. Every executive director in the state of Texas on October 8th received a letter from the governor's office, and we had to provide a response on December 1, which is yesterday. We did it sooner than that, of course. But it said, look at your rules and see the regulations that are creating an unnecessary burden.
Mm-hmm.
And this may be one. They specifically talked about education examination. I hear the point you're making, and so I'm just trying to process it. I'm a doodler, so I was over here drawing the line, like, who's on this side, and what does it mean if they come on this side? But you've given me enough to at least be able to process it. I'll have some conversations with Stuart and the team, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure, and I think it's, and I respect the fact that many members here do not have the history of that side.
It's important.
Stuart was certainly with us over there when we went through that. Dr. Smith was a fellow board member. If the commission or if this agency wants to push this along, I think be prepared for some public comment.
Absolutely.
So, because I think that it will certainly draw some from the license holders in the state of Texas.
I'll have my
So-
folks grab data. I'm a data person, so we'll take a look and see how many
And
applications.
I'm
what's
in no
triggered.
way saying that this is a huge number. I think because many times, once you have individuals that get established out in their communities, I don't know that they're moving across states. But I will say there are more athletic trainers, particularly in the college setting and the professional settings, that are moving with their coaches. We had a case at my institution this last year, that fell like this, and so it is happening.
Even though the NCAA says it's clearly not supposed to occur.
That's a whole nother meeting. That's a whole nother meeting, Dr. Smith.
Thank you,
So-
Mr. Chairman. I appreciate
Thank you,
the
Mr.
education.
Francis. Any other questions for Ms. Fudel?
Thank you, Molly, for everything that you do.
Sure, thank you.
So based on this, Molly, this was, obviously, we've discussed this. Do we need a vote to move this forward from our,
Yes, we would like a
barring
vote from
the,
you.
striking those, you know?
Yes, a vote with your recommendation for how to proceed.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept this proposed language, barring the restriction that was noted that we do not strike that language of the 2004? Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Dr. Smith makes that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let Mr. Fitch get on the
Yep.
record here. Mr. Fitch seconds that. Any discussion? All those in favor of, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Ms. Winston and Mr. Francis, I did not make a voice comment, so I know it may have not been recorded. I do accept and will recommend that Mr. Gaines be given an excused absence. Any evidence, Mr. Gaines sustained an accident in his home which required significant ankle surgery, and anybody in for some gross pictures. I have some of those on my phone, so for documentation purposes, I told him he must send his reasoning to me, and I hope he's watching out there. So, but anyway, Red, we miss you being here,
Absolutely.
and wish you a speedy recovery as you get over this ankle injury. I think the next item is discussion of the work group, a possible work group review to discuss the proposal for athletic trainer endorsement. I think this comes and I guess within a meeting of Mr. Francis Ural's meeting with TSATA back earlier in August. So who do I toss this to? Do you want to address? Do I want? I'm all in favor of putting a work group together to work with that group and come up with the proposals and things that they are, recommending. I thought we had obviously a public comment earlier that mentioned some of these things, but we're certainly wanting to would like to have a work group to work arm in arm with looking at and assisting them with whatever if there's any language changes that they are proposing. Certainly we can listen to those and hear any proposals. And if it's just merely us stating, yes, we're very much for this process and want to support it, then our work group can discuss that as well.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, the conversation that we had earlier in the last couple of months was fantastic. Just the visionary aspect of it, makes sense. It makes sense, and it puts Texas back in that spot of being a leader. And I think we all want to do that. We want to be a leader in this area. My thoughts on the work group is that we'll have education examination, GC, and RPM from our end. Usually it's just one or the other, and the others are kind of sitting second chair, but I think they all need to be involved in it. And I think it's understanding the concepts that are being discussed and then outlining what the next steps are. I think that's the part that everyone wants to know. What's the next step? Is it a rulemaking? Oh, it could be rulemaking, but also it's going to require statutory language. If it's statutory language, maybe that should be something that's discussed in the upcoming strategic planning session so we can fold that into our strategic initiatives, so we can lay out the path for getting these changes, implemented. So I think just a work group of, I think it's 2 members, is that correct? 2 members, and then from there, we will have a RAISE group, education and examination, run point on this, and they'll reach out to the work group members, and we'll make sure that we have all the knowledgeable folks involved in the conversation so that we can get an understanding of it and then lay out the process.
I've worked with their group a little bit, and certainly in some of the things that we are presenting here today that Ms. Fudel presented. So, Brittany, are you willing? Brittany and I will run point on that work group. And, with your permission, at least as some subject matter, I would like to bring in some representatives from their group. Obviously, they may not be a part of all the deliberations.
Sure.
But we certainly want to hear from them, because in many cases, it's one thing to read it on a piece of paper, and it's like the 2004, and then you hear rationale behind it, and why did you say this here? It's important to bring that rationale behind some of their recommendations. And so, Spanky, is there anything you want to add to that? We're gonna form this work group. I know this is an area that you're still certainly involved in, so.
Well, I think it
Hold on one second. So are we going to continue, this is for our forum.
Okay.
Lawyers, we have to
Okay.
do that kind of crap. Are we continuing with public comment? And if we are, remember, he can make some statements, and then we'll let that go there.
Okay, yeah, this was not, I was just having him just to address the endorsement aspect of that. That's strictly.
Okay.
And so if he steps out of that, I know you guys are going, you're going to throw the hammer at him.
Spanky, won't be the first hammer thrown.
So, really, very specifically, anything on this?
Well, the whole thing of the reason that we brought this to TDLR is because we want what we're talking about, what they're talking about, the endorsement issue and stuff. That we want to do it correctly. We want, it's my hope that a year from now that this is done, not tomorrow. That we work together on this. That, as I said in my public comment, that we work together on this to get with TDLR and do the things that we've talked about, that you and I have discussed, Mr. Director. And so I just think that it's a match that's really, really good.
Good.
And I also I think that, not only do I have to do this, but I got to do all the A's too. TOA, the TMA, all the, and to discuss what we're planning and stuff, so that we know ahead of time, or they know ahead of time, that we're not sneaking anything up on anybody.
Right.
So I think this is just perfect, and that it will give us a bigger outreach by working with TDLR, and when we put their check mark on it, then it gives us, what we're looking for.
Okay, perfect. Well, we look forward to working with it, and we'll get with you guys and bring in some subject matter and see what they have to, what TSATA brings to us. So we look forward to that arm-in-arm arrangement. Thank you.
We're going to bring the whole kit and caboodle, not the law change.
Right.
I mean, that's.
Well, it's helpful to have it all.
Well, you will know, serving on this board, you have to separate yourself. You can't legal,
I understand.
state legislature and stuff like that. So, but what we can do is the educational part, is that, that's the milestone. That is the key to the kingdom. And without it, we're right where we're stuck right now.
Correct.
And have been stuck for a long time. And the timing is right, and that's why we're doing it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Mr. Ware, Mary
Yes.
Winston, I just want to say I apologize for interrupting, because Mr. Stevens just wrapped it all up in a bow.
That's right.
That's what
right.
he came to do.
And did it very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not my first hammer.
Okay. Board, any other recommendation For our agenda items for our next meeting, anything on the, hot on the burner that we need to put on the record to? Okay, staff, moving on. Staff has indicated to me they would like for us to consider a March 10th at 9:30 for our next meeting. So if you all could look at that date and see if that is acceptable. I know Dahlia will be sending that out, and we'll get that in email confirmation from you to make sure that that is good. But if you could go ahead and put that on your calendars, we will we'll move from there. Any other items or issues that need to be addressed before we move for adjournment? Do I have a motion for adjournment? Dr. Smits makes that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Verbal. You gotta give me a verbal.
We were deciding who's going to.
Oh, y'all are seeing who's up
I've
next?
talked enough, apparently.
Okay, well, I always rely on you guys for the motions and the seconds, because I have to talk enough as it is. So, all those in favor of being adjourned? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much for your attendance.